system will provide for an electric utility as well as the consumers. So this one slide really kind of encapsulates quite a bit of benefits, and it looks real busy, but if I take a couple of moments to just go over it for you, you'll see it, you'll get an idea what the benefits are all about. So to break it down in your 360-degree solution, we break it down from utility engineers to the utility executives to the community leaders as well as the consumers. And if I go around this and kind of look at it in this direction, to the utility itself, Harold and Harold's team and the team that you're managing, they get away from manual meter reading, manual disconnects, manual reconnects, which would be a safety issue big time. All the truck rolls associated with doing that type of work, storm response, very much supports that. It detects faults and leaks. When we say leaks, it can be a water leak and it can be an electrical leak in the form of losses. We can reduce outages with a system like this. We can control things out of your system like capacitor banks and reclosers and other pieces of apparatus on your electrical system. We can conserve voltage, which will save on power consumption and power purchases. You can monitor your transformers. If you have a transformer that's too large, you're expending losses that you don't need to. If your transformer is too small, you're going to burn up at the very wrong time when your load is high and the heat is high, like on a very hot day. We can reduce your system losses. We can help extend your SCADA system, your command management systems, and help with peak reduction. It's all very much key things and important things to an electric utility to operate efficiently in a modern fashion. Utility executives, return on investment. The first thing Harold pointed out to me was about return on investment. There's an impact with your aging infrastructure, with your metering system. You start to see that. You don't have tremendous, you're not seeing a lot of bad meters today, around 2%. But, that's 2% on a reoccurring basis. That's probably growing. But you're seeing some aging infrastructure impact to the utility executive, but you're going to be able to provide improved customer experience, which we'll talk a little bit about. There's an impact coming with things like renewables on the grid, which are photovoltaic, maybe wind, maybe folks are putting in generators. We'll see more and more of that as time goes on. Improved planning with your CapEx and OpEx, because you're going to have your arms around your system. You're going to know a lot more about your system than you ever did before. And lower supply side costs. Touch on that as well. For the community leaders, reduce carbon emissions through lower energy consumption, reduce power plants needed, peak load reductions, which again plays into power plant reduction. We can support with this system renewable generation, things like wind and solar with net metering, which is built into the system. It's just inherent in the system. Support electric cars, conserve natural resources, and we talk about energy efficiency for the smart grid. As you start to control things, have the ability to control things and automate that, a system like this will support that. And the last area here is for the consumers. And I'm going to use that word hypothetically because you're managing the system here, but they can see lower costs, rate choices, and simplified energy management. Hypothetically, if you're buying your bulk purchase power less costly and you're operating more efficiently, you will see lower costs, which hopefully can control to the consumer. Will improve reliability through faster restorations after an outage. Say a storm rolls through, a lightning storm, a windstorm, an ice storm, a snowstorm. You're going to have outages. You can do faster restoration with a system like this because you can see where the outages are right from your terminal. You can also see where the restorations are right from your computer terminal. And you don't send your guys home until they're all fixed. That's very key. So it's good to know where your outages are. It's good to know how many outages you have, but it's also very important to know that all the outages are taken care of. Proactive customer service for your customers. Again, providing choice, more responsive are your customer service reps. And what I mean by that is, when someone calls in today, they that human being in your office has to contact someone like Harold or one of his team members. With a system like this, they're going to be enabled with a lot of information. They're going to be able to see if that customer's actually out or not, for example. The customer might think they're out, they don't have power, but you might be delivering power right to that meter, they'll know that. So therefore, it's probably something like a main breaker or something in their fuse panel, and you can help direct that person to be more efficient on finding that problem, diagnosing it right then and there. And there's many, many more examples. Again, I'm trying to keep the time very limited. There's no need for estimated bills. You can get on-demand readings right now, any meter, anytime. Online tools, these are things that are running web apps, computer apps, web portals that allow not only the utility but consumers to manage, monitor, and review their consumption. And that goes to there's many third-party companies that are working with us today where we have in-home tools. One it's available, I would say a lot of my electric utilities have deployed the system, aren't using some of these tools yet, but they plan to in future iterations of their project, or their CMI project. But one might be just putting a wireless box in the home that will allow that customer to see announcements. Therefore, it's kind of like a text box. But it'll tell them if they're going to experience an outage, or if you're approaching a peak as a town, or if the parade's running late due to rain, or just offers that type of communication. Once again, this is not just a meter reading system. That's one thing that would be very key on that I really haven't touched on. AMR, that was advanced metering, or AMR, automated meter reading. AMI is advanced metering infrastructure. So this is providing a lot of bells and whistles well beyond your typical needs of just reading meters. And the last one is convenience.
John, is customers or consumers able to pay with a credit card online with this system?
Absolutely. I'm hoping that's one of my future slides. If we can talk about that once you brought it up here, in case I don't. Under consumers, let's face it, if you want to pay your electric bill today, you typically pay a month at a time. Many folks are paid weekly, and therefore they're not accustomed to paying a month's worth of electric bill at once. If they're not extremely strong in budgeting, or if they're living paycheck to paycheck. The argument is that if you have the ability to pay as you determine you'd like to, that's what the prepay is all about. So just to give you a real brief example. Web portal. Most people have a cell phone today. You can get a text or an email that will tell you, oh, you're running low on power. You might only have 2 days left, 48 hours or 24 hours to get a countdown. And if you want to put $17 on your account, because that's what you have to get for the weekend, you can do that. You can't do that in a typical fashion unless you run over here with $20 and put it down. But you can do that right through the web portal onto your credit card or your debit card, offering a lot of flexibility. The other thing that can facilitate is, and we're seeing many customers appreciate this, they might not have the funds available to pay a deposit, big numbers of folks. With prepay, arguably you don't have to put a deposit down because you are paying your power consumption in advance instead of calling out. If that makes sense. Did I answer?
Yes, thank you.
And that's very brief. I mean, if I showed you the web portals, they're beautiful.
What other municipalities are using your system?
I'll show you a picture. We're up to about 140 plus systems. I think we might be over 150 now of this exact same system around the U.S. and around the globe. In the northeast part of the U.S., we have about 15, and I'll show you a few of those in a moment. A lot of these I've already touched on in terms of the AMI experiences with munis. But again, better use of natural resources. Example, it enables micro generation, solar panels, wind generation. We do that all for a net meter. And there's a lot of incentives that come and go from the government to pay for things like solar panels or wind generation. So the best example I can give is my next door neighbor. He put a full side of his roof with solar panels. 50% is paid by funds that were granted to him, and he's loving it. He has extremely low electric bill communication that your advanced metering infrastructure is providing. Do things like street lighting, there's many more examples beyond that. But some more AMI experiences are improved access to information, central energy usage, customer web portals, improved electrical service, better outage management. We talked about this term last gas, but that's the meter calling home saying, hey, I'm going down, my power just cut, I just lost power. And then restoration management. You know, I touched on it, but again, you have a three-phase line go down because a tree came across it, and the guys that called out at 2 a.m. and they were in a pouring rain, they're fixing it. They think they've taken care of everything because they restored that power to that three-phase line. They pack up and go home, but Mrs. Jones down there at 3rd and Allen Street, she was not part of that. She had a little tree branch come down on her single service, just her phone power. And she's not a complainer, so if she's not power for 36 hours and maybe makes a phone call, hey, when you guys get into the outages? And these guys, they don't know it. You don't know when you have outages. Your customers have to tell you today. With a system like this, you will know. Talk about that no deposit on flexible payment options, prepay, an example. And there's many more choices that you can consider as an electric utility. I wouldn't say all of these things are considered immediately, but over time, you have a system that you can leverage newer technologies. And I really haven't talked about the mesh. Maybe the next week we'll pretty much do the same thing, where every electric meter on a system is an electric meter, but it's also communicating. And therefore, you create this mesh of communications. It's over what's called 900 megahertz of RF communication, which is free. The town is totally not going to say to everyone. But Harold mentioned some transformer loading and reduce risk of outage, etc. So I'll move on to the next slide. So I think that last one will go backwards. So that was some of the improve communities, and then some information to improve utility operations. But lower operational costs, reduce truck rolls, connect, disconnect, outage management, increase grid awareness, you know what's going on, your voltage monitoring, outage monitoring, and so on. Efficient network. We have the lowest burden in the industry, meaning our system is costing very little. In fact, our meters communicate for about 2 minutes a day. That's about all communication that's going on. Low hardware footprint. Our system, the entire system is nothing but meters. In other words, we don't have anything up on towers. We don't have anything mounted in substations. We literally install meters and install the system. Therefore, the technical expertise, these guys already have. They already know how to install the meter. No interference. It's a very quiet network in terms of RF communication with your less than 2 minutes per day. It's probably about 90 seconds worth of communications for a 24-hour period. And improved planning and asset utilization. I think that's very key. Your equipment is sized properly. You're not just winging it. You're not just making a guess. Over time, you can see what that piece of equipment is doing in terms of its utilization. Are you way oversized, or way undersized? Start to have that intelligence built into the system right away. Just a different way to show you as the smart grid evolves. There's new things that are coming about. I mentioned the street lighting, the expansion of renewables being used. People are starting to look at electric cars. I wouldn't say it's big yet, but who knows what the future brings. Again, the system is going to lend itself to supporting that. It's a greener, smarter, and much more connected and efficient system. Also will support microgrids as they increase. Those are small turbine generators or what have you, put in areas to help avoid the need for these huge coal plants. We asked about some of our customers. I just put this slide together just to say, this is an example of communities that have kind of neat-looking logos. The few I made sure we're all here. That's the Borough, Lansdale. They're very close. You drive by. Or Middletown, Pennsylvania, out there. Harrisburg, close by. Danvers, just north of us. Got a few others on here. This one's pretty neat to see. It's Alaskan villages. It's a great. They're right now going to do an improvement. They use a certain type of what we call backhaul. I'm not going to get too techy, but they were using I think they were using the cable company's cable to do some backhaul from what we call a gatekeeper. And they received a grant to put fiber through town. So they're going to just change these handful of gatekeepers they have on their fiber. There's a couple of other here. There's one from New York, just north of us here. I'm not sure where. I know they're up there, but I haven't seen them. Oh, so that's my general overview. I didn't get real, due to the amount of time. I didn't get technical side too much, but any other questions or comments? Or would you like to see
Any questions for Mr. Young?
You said that the signal travels on 900 RF?
Yeah.
That's a real short distance transmission, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Where they all just jump at each other and talking to each other?
Yes, exactly right.
So that's like they talk to each other and relay information.
Yeah, the band is, I forget the exact numbers, but it's like 902 and 936 primarily. That's set aside by the Federal Communications folks, and that's a non-licensed. That's exactly what you're using today. But your devices today can only talk that very short distance one time. So to get to a mesh network, what we've done is every single meter is a repeater. So to get home here, it just hops from meter to meter in a very efficient manner. Like I said, less than 2 minutes per day. So there's very little communication going on, but there's a whole lot of capability there. And if you were to see the more technical part of this stuff, you'd see, if I was to put a pie chart up, you'd see like maybe 5% of the day is set aside for, or way less than 5%, but very short part of the day is set aside for the actual meter needs, but all the rest of that communication capability is there. So if you wanted to do things like see what's going on with the traffic control, or if you wanted to control devices out on your system, or if you, as I mentioned, street lighting as an example. People think, well, what do I need street lighting control for? Some things that are going on in the street lighting world, Dave can talk about this a lot more, but there are things like, sure, if the street light's working or not working, you'd want to know, but it doesn't seem like a big deal. But another example might be from 2 a.m. to 5 a.m., you might want to minimize 50%, say 50% of that consumption, because there's hardly anyone on the street. That's an example of sell light with less light and less consumption going on. But that's it, basically.
Hello?
Yes. I have a question about the size of the meter. It's going to be hanging on the outside of your house, correct?
Correct.
All right. Is it as large or larger than the one that's already on your house?
It's probably exact same size.
Okay, so what will it cost somebody to put new stuff over this spot?
No, in fact, the panel box won't change. Just the actual meter that pulls out, and a new one plugs in. They look essentially identical.
Good question, Flo.
Yeah, you're not going to be changing it. That's why it's so easy to.
Something like this can be phased in then, right? We don't have to do the whole change all at once.
Yeah, and that's a great question, and it comes up all the time, and I can tell you that inevitably, it always seems like people that pull the trigger do the whole thing at once. But to walk you through quickly, my example of phasing it in, one might be you go a fifth of the town, or a sixth of the town, or I know you have new development coming in.
New development's coming in, yeah.
Yeah, you might want to just do that. So that's an example of how you can phase it in, rather than buying those meters that are like older meters. And the way I always put it, and please don't, I'm not trying to be disrespectful, but everything that system did that's installed there today does everything we bought it to do. But the example I like to give is, it's like buying an 8-track player. It'll still play 8 tracks, but you're not buying 8 tracks. And that old system will still do that. So you can continue to use that system, and it will do everything it was meant to do, but you might take a quarter of your town and convert it. And you can phase it in that way, and do 25 or 20% at a time. That's one example. And there's a couple of other examples. We can do a drive-by similar to what you're doing today. I kind of recommend against it because you're going to have to pay for this piece of equipment that goes into a van that you're going to drive around with. But eventually, you're going to do the whole town, and then that piece of equipment becomes worthless. It could probably last 20 years, but you might only use it for 4 or 5. So there's another way to do it, which is to take a that section, that would be 100%, no need to drive by, you get all that rich data that I talked about, real time, all the time, and you don't have to drive that in, nor do you have to buy a piece of truck account too.
Thank you, John. Any other questions from council? Right now, I'm going to open it up to the floor. Is there any questions from the audience regarding what
Are the meters UL approved?
No. That's not a requirement in our industry. Until very recently, the conversations have gone on. What we've looked into is our meters exceed, the way we test and build our meters today exceed UL approval. So we are promoting and anxiously hoping that the industry converts to UL, because it'll be a very easy transition for this particular meter. And by the way, that's a great question, because in this industry, we've had a number of meters have problems. And I think you know what I'm talking about locally here, not too far from here. Yeah.
Census meters.
Census meters, and I don't want to talk about the competition. All I can say is that was unique to that vendor. It's a very important thing to talk about. I'm going to send Hal, because it was brought up in a public meeting, I'm going to send you an article. We are very large in Canada. Canada is mandating that utilities move forward with AMI, and therefore we have a lot of AMI systems in Canada. In fact, in Canada, they had that incident happen where that vendor's meter heated up and melted and maybe even caught fire. And in the article, which I love, is it talks about the problems they're having, and they say, in another part of their system, they were installing Elster, these meters, didn't have a single problem. So, thank you for bringing that up, but that is an issue, and we're ready to move forward with UL. We'd like it to happen, because...
But they do have a certification for smart meters, right?
UL?
Yeah.
Nobody can mandate what the electric utilities do until it's, something's changed to govern that, to mandate that.
See, like the NEC, we're not governed by the NEC as a utility, it's the NESC.
Right, and like I don't think you...
What the government thinks is the utilities are doing their due diligence and doing everything the right way, that they don't need to be mandated by another group, like regular electricians have to be. So the electric company, we run the power from the pole to your house, from the service head through the meter into your panel. That's all governed by the NEC, National Electric Code, where the electrician has to have that inspected by a qualified inspector, say it meets all the requirements, and if something were to happen, your insurance company would cover your losses. But if you didn't get that inspected, your insurance company can say, hey, this wasn't wired, we're not paying you for it. But the utilities aren't governed by any of that stuff. So.
Oh, I understand that a government entity doesn't necessarily demand it, but if they have a system, why wouldn't you want to get approved by it?
Cost. Every one of those labels costs something, which gets rolled to the utility, which gets rolled to you. And if it's not mandated, there's no reason to pay an extra cost, which has to get rolled eventually to the consumer that's maybe not benefiting or even demanding it.
So John, it's never been mandated for, as long as there's been meters? No, there's no meters?
Never. We conform to something called ANSI, which is the American National Society Institute or something like that. And they have requirements. ANSI's all over our industry for the last 100 years, or I'm probably exaggerating, 50 years. And we conform to ANSI. UL was never a requirement put upon electric utilities, so we've never built to UL. A lot of I represent other companies like this company, ABB, and they build equipment for industry as well as utility. Now, in industry, you have to meet UL, right? In a plant. So a lot of our equipment made by a company like ABB, the same equipment that goes to an industrial account has the UL label on it, and the same stuff built for a utility, built the exact same way in the same plant, does not have the UL label on it. They're built the same. And the question would be, well, why wouldn't you put a UL label on that? There's a cost associated with that, and therefore, if it's not mandated, you wouldn't.
All right, John, thank you. I think you answered the question. Any other questions from the audience regarding this issue? Hearing none. Thank you, gentlemen, for your presentation.
Thank you. John had stated that Canada is making the smart meter program. So is Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania has Act 129 for the investor-owned utilities, and they have to have smart meters in every household by 2023. So whether that's going to fall upon the munis and the REAs, rural electric co-ops and stuff, at this time, maybe not, but once 2023 comes about, they might push it down to our level. That's kind of weird. I mean, we're buying power use. If they have to lower their consumption, but the load that's on the grid, and they're being mandated by the Fed, they can sit there and tell us, hey, you can't just burn whatever you want to burn. You're going to have to control your load, or you're going to pay a premium for it. Even though we don't have to apply Act 129, we might be paying a premium when it comes to buying power, because we're not going to, regulate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, John. Appreciate it. Any by yourself?
I by myself, unfortunately, the part I need of,
I'm not sure if that was one of Chuck's claims or not, but there's a lot of good next year, huh?
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Alice from GE Digital.
Well, good afternoon, everyone, council president and also public. My name is Alice Gonzalez from GE Digital Energy. As we mentioned, there were two others that were supposed to be here with me, but unfortunately their planes got canceled a few times. But I will try to answer all of your questions. We're here to talk about what you may have heard previously in terms of the advanced metering infrastructure. Therefore, I won't go into a ton of details, assuming that you may have seen or heard some of this already, but please stop me at any point in time if you have any questions. Okay, so just a background of myself, I represent Solutions as a Service line within Digital Energy of GE. We are headquartered in Atlanta, and I don't think I need to necessarily go into the background of GE as a company, but I think it's important to know that as we work with electric utilities, and we've been working with a lot of the investor-owned utilities, we started to take the smart grid and grid modernization projects to municipalities. And what we have found is that, what we heard, is that the way that is being offered, just to sell equipment and put it all together, could be a bit cumbersome for the municipalities for a couple of reasons. One, it's not cheap, right? So you're looking at a big investment for an upfront cost, and sometimes there are unclear benefits. And oftentimes the benefits have to be explained not just in terms of a technical benefit, but it has to be seen to the public, right? What are the benefits that a community at large could benefit from such a system? So unfortunately, Harold, I know you don't want to hear that, but we need to basically quantify all of the benefits that you're putting into place. The other part is that the resources that might typically be required to put up such of these systems is not necessarily very trivial. Right? There are equipment, network infrastructure, there are personnel involved, and oftentimes you may be dealing with several different people. So you may have some finger pointing involved, and when we heard all of these issues that municipalities brought to us, and they said, gee, if you want to be successful in this space, you basically have that is this technology out there and packaging it in a way that works with municipalities. So this has been developed. It really looks at focusing on what benefits the municipality can get. So we know that your two typical, your key areas might be serving the community to give the lowest electrical rates in a reliable manner. Now, you can do all of that, but you also have to achieve some type of cost savings, because any type of investment you make, again, we need to quantify those benefits, and ideally those benefits should be able to either reinvest into your electric system or hopefully go back to the community so it could really feed your economic development programs. This slide here really looks at what we'll be talking about today. So again, I'm going to assume that you may have seen some of this already. And then we'll go into some of the system benefits, particularly why GE's offering is a bit different, and then we'll go into the financial side of things. So This is a little bit busy, as you see. And a quick anecdote on maybe a background of here. My 6-year-old asked me, Mom, what do you do for a living? And I was really thrilled because, you know, he asked a lot of questions. I think he's really advanced for his age. And I started going into all of these bits and pieces about a meter, how it's connected through a network system. It goes to some, you know, some software that you can see and control things. He said, Mom, can you read me a bedtime story now? So I tried to simplify it when my 4-year-old asked, Mom, what do you do for a living? I said, I sell stuff to keep it simple. She said, well, you know, why do you do that? I said, I sell it to put food on the table. So she said, Mom, you sell food where? At a mall? So I realized that, okay, it was a bit too simple. So the whole, you know, behind this, and when we start looking at what we're putting into place, we could really get very technical, we could get very simple. You know, the end of my story is that I got away, that I was able to tell them exactly what Mommy does in the day-to-day living, and hopefully I don't put it too simple here today, but still, the technical stuff I've gone through several times with Harold, and we could go through any specific questions there. But essentially what we're looking at, to simplify things, we have meters, which might be residential and commercial meters. It will be connected to a network system. Here we see there could be multiple choices that GE uses, right? We could use an RF mesh, what's considered also a point-to-multipoint, or even cellular. What we do is we partner with several others within the industry so that it would all be under GE's umbrella at the end of the day. What we'll do is we will choose the right technology for the utility, so it's not just one choice. To make sure that the utility will be delivered what they expect at the end of the day. All of that will be hosted in a GE's data center secure system, which is fully redundant. So in case there's any issues, there's an outage at one, you will have full access to the full capabilities of it. The key point here, which is missing, is that all of this will come under the ownership of GE. So typically, let's say if I'm vendor X and I can only supply a few pieces of the system, I will give you my lowest quote and you will see what that cost is, and it will look very appealing to you. But what we're trying to do is really demystify it and figure out all the bits and pieces to deliver you a solution that at the end of the day you have full access to all the data that's required, and also full capability to do management. Within the system here, I know that you have an AMR system today, which is a one-way communications. So what that does is it takes data from the meters and feeds it upstream. What we're talking about is an AMI system which provides two-way communications. So not only can you get data going upstream on how much energy you're consuming, but also on the conditions of your line and your system, but you're also able to control it. So if you have to disconnect or reconnect at any point in time, you can do that remotely. And also there are some utilities that are using that in terms of helping with their outages, where, for example, one in Long Island is looking at disconnecting certain segments when they're flooded at their substation. So, it's really looking towards the safety of their crews, not in terms of benefits. So, any questions so far before I move on? Okay, so what you saw before is what is, high level in the AMI system. Here we're talking about why are we different, right? So on the right-hand side, there are 3 levels of services that we offer. One is a managed service, a fully managed service. One is hosted, and then there's deployed. Deployed is what you typically find today in the industry, right? You purchase your equipment, you purchase your software, you put it all together, and then it's all on you to operate it at the end of the day. What we'll focus on is on the left, where we manage program. Structured is that GE will own and operate all of the equipment. The day or guarantee to the customer, and we also provide you with a safety stock in-house. So if there are any meters that are broken, 1 or 2 at a time, you have the equipment right there to replace it. We'll need to restock that for you. If there is a bigger issue that happens, let's say a bigger emergency that a larger number of meters are broken, we are also on the hook to work with you for a contingency plan to get that up and running. Because we're providing you, again, with data and functionality of the system. So if anything is broken for whatever reason, throughout what you saw before, the responsibility falls upon us. So some utilities have looked at this almost as an insurance program over the life of the contract. And the contract is typically a 10-year term. What your typical bill might look like today, and even providing time of use intervals for the public. That you see is overlaid with a temperature scale. So for example, Mrs. Smith does not have access to the puts a lot of the power now back to the customer. It helps manage their consumption. It also provides them with additional programs like prepaid, which would help them manage how they pay for bills today. So the prepaid also gives them capabilities to have their payments. Again, your job is not to disconnect. The customers, it's really to help keep the lights on. And these programs really enable this. And then, time of use, load control capabilities of load shedding to help with your snapshot of this, assuming that, this may not be new stuff that you're hearing. Key point here is whatever system you're looking at, you want to understand what's included with that. There is the AMR system, as Harold outlined earlier, that does. Right? You have the AMI that has a bit more functionality, but even with an AMI system, you have to be careful because you want to make sure that everything that you look at in your 5 or 10-year plan, whatever system you put in place today should have the capabilities to support it in the future. And that is things that we basically build into a solution from day one. Right? Now, benefits to the department, the electric department in Perkasie. If we start on the left, we look at the basic advanced meter infrastructure benefits. So essentially, a lot of the benefits there come from reduction in truck rolls, right? Because now you no longer have to drive around and press that button as we spoke about before. You also have improved meter accuracy. It gives you outage detection capabilities. And last, but actually maybe most important, it also puts, as we spoke, information in the hands of the customer, so they have improved billing and customer service. The next bucket we see, it helps you reduce system losses. So you have a lot of data that you're getting from these meters. Not only is it the kilowatt hour consumption information, but you're getting voltage, frequency on an interval basis. So with it, I know it was mentioned earlier that it will help with transformer management, helping with that, reducing that system loss from 5.3 to a lower number. Now, it's very also important to notice that on a basic AMI system, you may not get all of this. You can do it from manual reports that you can extract, but what we're focusing on is providing Borough of Perkasie with a meter data management system, which is a software application that crunches all of this tons of data that you get to make it in a very simplified format that it's easy to take action upon. So at the beginning of the day, the operations crew can look at it and say, well, these are where my issues are, this is where I can dispatch it, because at the end of the day, they'll be getting savings from here. Also, energy purchases, I'm sure, is very important to the borough, and looking at your wholesale purchases really comes from hourly data that you may have today, right? So you're assuming that your peaks occur at a certain point in time, and you make your decisions in purchasing based on that. Now you have information on an hourly basis, where you could group it per meter, per feeder, per substation, and actually understand when the wholesale contracts occur. Instead of purchasing, let's say, so iTrack, this is a total cost of ownership slide, is the financial part of GE's offering. On the right, looks at the cost of our managed services. It's broken down in a very simple manner. There's an upfront fee, and then there's a monthly subscription fee. And what that includes is everything on the left that you see. The meters, the network infrastructure, also not just your upfront cost, cost, but over the 10-year period of that contract, it takes into account all of the service fees required. So again, we're doing all of the work behind the scenes and delivering all the accessibility back to Perkasie. Now I put it into 3 different colors. Black is what everyone may provide to you. Red is where you may see differences in a base AMI system. So as you look at one AMI system to another, several times some of these items in red may not be quoted. And I'll quote, for example, on the meters, on the residential meters, there's these remote connectors, connect switches, which is a very powerful device. We assume that 100% of your meters may have that from day one. If I talk about functionalities without quoting it, then there's a discrepancy. So we're just noting that typically many providers do not provide that up front. Your meter data management software that we spoke about before that really crunches all of that data and make it actionable may not be included. Sometimes the customer portal may be an add-on. The items in blue often gets passed off to the customer itself. So it may not be provided by someone giving you these services, but Borough would have to take this on, and it may be a surprise in year 1 or year 2. Right? For example, business process management, you're doing things a certain way today. We're talking about putting in all these great and brand new systems, but your customer service representatives may be used to one way of doing things. So what we do with our customers is sit with each one of your personnel that will be involved in this project, understand the way they're doing things today, and map out how it will get them to where they need to be. As we go down, so the top half is what you may see as your upfront expenses, and the first column here for a basic AMI system with a lot of the features removed to make it economical, right? You may have a $1 item, right? As you put in, you quantify all of the other bits and pieces to make it functional for you, that number increases. So the intent of this slide is to help the Borough in their decision making in terms of whether a managed system or a self-deploy would make more sense. What we've done here is really taken some industry numbers to compare it. And overall, just to give you the rough number here, our managed services over a 10-year period, we're looking at about 1.6 million, as opposed to an AMI system with reduced functionality. If you were to add all the hidden costs in, it could be about 2.4 million. If you put all apples to apples with us, it could be almost 3 million. So we provided the Borough with the tools to basically make edits as you have more information that's specific to you, but to the best of our. So these are your options here, as I understand it. You could either replace your broken meters currently, your AMR meters, so I'll consider that do nothing, basically it's the status quo. If we look at the additional benefits that we were speaking about, essentially none of those will be captured. And we understood that there's a new residential development that's going in with about 400 homes. So this is where we urge you to look at what would be your investment into these new developments by just simply doing business as usual, as opposed to taking it and reinvesting it into some of the other programs. Then if we were to look at a self-deployed one, is where we try to provide you with the most functionality from day one so you can capture the most benefits. Some utilities may not have the money currently to use it for something else. So, looking at the low upfront investments is something that we offer to our customers. And overall, what we look at from the previous charts is that, generally speaking, we found to have a lower cost of ownership in that model. Then we're looking at, so you're ultimately minimizing your risk. The idea is that GE will be doing this multiple. We have done this with other IUs in terms of just generally deploying our AMI systems. Look at us as a partner, not just a vendor. We want to share some of that risk with you. So as you look at where Perkasie wants to go in the future, making sure whatever you install today is future-proof, meaning 2 years down the road, if you were to, you want to invest in a new system, you don't want to scratch your head and say that whatever I install, it was so basic, now I have to almost rip and replace it, or I can't do that. So you really have to build upon a foundation, a good AMI foundation, with the right bits and pieces installed from day one. Right? I have 3 charts that really quantifies financially in terms of if you were to look at a simple payback. So this is the, if you were to install a basic AMI only, without all the bells and whistles, we see line going down. Ultimately, there's limited payback on this, right? Because we looked at the 3 sets of benefits that you can get. You already have an AMR system today, so you already captured some of the reduction in truck rolls. A bulk of the benefit that you Perkasie can get is now utilizing the data you can capture from the AMI system and making it useful to address your system losses, and that really requires an MDM so that the technicians are not working with tons and tons of spreadsheets to make that data intelligible. So with an MDM system, we see that it goes beyond 0 payback from a basic AMI to one to being about just under 8 years. And finally, if we were to look at including energy purchases as part of the benefits that Perkasie can get from them, what we assume, and we had a rough number of about, and we said the first year, maybe 5% of that might be able to net. And we roll that out, assuming in year 1, you're not going to capture many benefits, and it increases over time. So using it for the AMI system, using an MDM, right, to help you with your system losses, and also with your energy purchases at a 2-year payback. Assuming that all of the costs, if the subscription fees, which is not a large number, that also you actually would have an immediate payback. But again, the borrower would have to decide whether you want to take on that cost or pass them along. Basically, our pricing is broken down as such that our upfront fee is $150,000 for this system, and we have a recurring monthly subscription fee of $3 per endpoint per meter, essentially. So some customers look at taking that, the utilities look at passing that along to the customers. Others say, they will take the benefits that they get and basically pay back for the system. So there are different ways that you can look at it. If it is you have a preference for a lower upfront fee, basically, it's a balloon which way you want to squeeze it, you can have a higher subscription fee or vice versa, and that's something we're willing to work with you on. Key point here is, as we've been working with Harold over the past couple months, we do appreciate the forward-thinkingness of that Perkasie is looking at how they can utilize such a system for some of the additional applications. And GE is really committed with working with our municipal customers. And what we like to do is really include the MDM, which is typically for the size not necessarily included, at the same fee at no additional cost. Assuming that this would be budgeted this year. That is basically the end of my presentation. Any questions?
Any questions from council?
On the lease plan, is all the equipment covered like under a warranty, replaced at GE's expense?
So we don't necessarily call it a lease because I know that would end up accounting might be different, but essentially that is what it is. Yes. Any equipment in terms of the equipment that we would have on site, deployed the network infrastructure or the meters, we have a responsibility to replace it. For cost savings, we assume that you would utilize your staff to do the installation of the meters. If there are 1 or 2 meters that are broken, you will replace it. But if there are a couple hundred that for some reason something happened at one time, we need that contingency plan that we need to supply that service for you.
And who owns the meters after the 10-year contract is over?
Okay, so there are 3 options. After the 10-year contract, if you like the service the way that it has been running over that period, you could decide to continue the project as is for, let's say, an additional 5 years or an additional 10 years. The assumption is at that time is that a lot of the cost to GE would have already been reduced. So your subscription fee at that point in time should go down at the end of the 10-year period. That's option one. Option two would be if your personnel thinks that they're so used to the system, they like it, and it's something that they're willing to take in-house, they could then purchase the system at a reduced rate. We work with you depending on how you depreciate your system to get the network, the equipment under your name and under your operations. And then the third, for some reason, after that 10-year period, there's some new technology that comes out and you don't want to be tied to this anymore, you're free to basically go in that direction. Now, throughout that 10-year period, we are responsible to you through service level agreements. So on a monthly basis, we are measured in how we perform. So if there are recurring breaches on the contract, basically that is a breach of contract. But we definitely have not been in that situation and we don't want to be.
Thank you. Anyone else? Well,
Alice, where are these meters manufactured?
In the US, in Somersworth, New Hampshire.
And are all the components manufactured in the US as well?
I'm sorry.
The components to put them together?
Yes.
Are they also manufactured in the
Yes, I believe that is the case, and I can validate that all of the components are. But we have been working a lot with when they had the ARA funding, and that was one of the key requirements. So 99% sure, and I'll get that back to you.
Barbara?
Yes, how many customers do you have in Pennsylvania?
In Pennsylvania, we're working more with the bigger utilities now, like PPL, but not under this program. So it's just over the past 10 months or so that they basically hired me to work with municipalities for the SaaS model. We have been their number in Oklahoma and Mississippi, where we really started, and also Georgia, that are under the SaaS model that you're seeing here specific. So in total, I think we have about 80,000 meters under our management. And basically the rest of them are in process.
So there's none right now in Pennsylvania other than the big...
Not under this model, that GE is taking ownership of it.
Thank you.
Okay, council, any other questions? Mary, now I'll open up the floor. Is there any questions from the audience?
Are the meters UL listed, certified by UL?
Today they are not, but they're going under certification that the expectation is by the end of the year they will be.
Harold, did you have
Yeah, as far as the meters go and you replacing them, Middletown had a flood a couple years ago and the meters went, underwater and were damaged. And I would take it that they had to pay to replace them at their own expense or under their insurance policy. If that were to happen here under the managed plan, would GE replace those meters at no cost to the borough?
It's a great question. We've had the question asked in 20 Alley, what happens if it's blown away? The answer is yes. Even if this happens in year 9, we are responsible for that equipment. So we don't call it an insurance policy, but it is an imputed insurance policy where I think most utilities do not take out an insurance typically. So yes, we would be responsible.
Okay, thank you, Alice. Any other questions? Hello?
Yeah, it occurred to me that the managed plan would mean that someone in an office far away has control, has all of the information for everyone in our borough as far as their electric usage is concerned. And I just wonder if there are issues with that as far as privacy rights are concerned.
When we started this program, it was not just working with municipalities, but GE has been doing a similar type of function for the turbine business, which, on the generation side, high security is definitely one of the utmost threats. So what we've done is mimic the data center security that's there. So there's Security that we talk about on the data that's encrypted through the air. There's access information in terms of passwords, who gets that. But beyond that, it's really the processes involved, right? To make sure that only the right personnel has access to that information. If someone is no longer with the company, making sure that their access rights is cut short of it. So there's different levels of security that is taken into place that GE takes in each level of security. So far, we have not had any issues in Alpharetta, Georgia, and the backup is in Cincinnati. You get, because everything is connected to the line, you get your voltage information, and then on commercial meters, there may be about 12 other options in terms of the three-phase capabilities that you can get on demand reads. Really not just taking it from a basic meter reading device, but now turning it into one that has technical features that the electric department can use for their engineering analysis.
Does anyone else in the public have any other questions?
I want to know, is the borough and GE going to be responsible?
So, I just want to make sure I understand correctly. You're talking about shutting on and off the meters or the wireless network itself?
There's a similar program in Maryland, and on extremely hot days, their air conditioners are shut off extended periods of time. And in those kind of situations, if you're like my situation where you're running sensitive computer equipment, and I wonder, because this is an intrusion upon personal home or personal business, any damages to equipment that happen from that, is GE or the borough going to step up and take account of that?
So that's a good question. From day one, when we're giving the borough the capability to add load control to the system, it's not assumed that it will necessarily be done on day one, right? The borough can help with their peak load reduction in other means, not necessarily do load control. If they do opt to do load control, they basically, I assume here, that you will basically be getting your customer base signing on to these programs, right? It may be on a voluntary basis.
Yeah, correct. You wouldn't make anybody do it. You're going to ask them to volunteer to do it. We cannot shut you off without your permission for load control. And they're not shutting your air conditioning off. They're adjusting the temperature. They're either going to adjust it up or lower it. It's like 4 degrees plus or minus. So it's just changing a little bit of the temperature in your home. I don't know if that information is correct with Maryland or not, but it has to be a volunteer basis. You have to.
Maryland last year doing 105-degree days. This gentleman's property on several occasions was adjusted so that it was in the high 90s.
Yeah,
That should not happen with
I don't know if they make it mandatory that everybody has to conform or if you have to sign.
He signed up for the program and he got a discount in his kilowatt per hour price or whatever to sign up for.
So there's typically a high setting that you would set that to. I've seen, like, I'm in New Jersey there, I think it's up to 78 degrees is the highest that it will be. If it's above that, there definitely is a problem with that piece of equipment that I would say, which would be a one-off situation. Without getting additional information. But because the load control is not from day one, we're assuming there should not be any damage to the property, but that's something we definitely could look at further, on a case-by-case basis.
Anything else? Any questions from the audience? Council? Thank you, Alice.
Thank you.
That concludes our presentation to reader. Thank you. We'd like to move into a discussion about security deposit requirements. Do you want to give us some background on this and start off?
I guess we're going to have you
We're able to leave, and then the person who did pay. We're having more and more cases, tenants who are renting units. We can't start the shut-off procedures until. So I don't know how he has anything to add to this, but we did bring Jason Hatch, who's our utility billing clerk here today. He's more familiar with the actual raw data on, the number of accounts we're talking about, how often we're having issues.
Comments first before we open it up to the floor. We'll go issue by issue, obviously. Is there anyone from the audience like?
So again, this is just about changing the requirement to provide for the security deposit being due on day one. So essentially when the new customer comes in to set up their electric utility account, they would be required to provide the security deposit right away instead of the borough, 7 days or weeks later billing for the security deposit.
I agree with that.
That's a great question, Mr. Mayor. It's $200 for accounts that have a heat source other than electric, and it's $300 for homes that are heated by electric heat.
Mary, did you have your hand up?
You're talking about strictly rental properties now.
Well, it's open for discussion, Mary.
I think
We have much more of an issue with the rental units than we do with the ones that are occupied by the.
Mary, it's both. For someone that buys a house, that moves into the borough, they're required to put a security deposit.
I think what she stated though before is that you can provide documentation if you live somewhere else and you have a history of paying your electric bill. I don't see any reason to require someone buying property with that establishment that they already have a history, at least required.
Well, somebody buying property, when they go to sell property, you have recourse, even if they abandon property.
Right.
So I see no reason to get property owners to put this.
Yeah, they made their investment, and that's standard in the industry.
The deposit is returned, when is the deposit returned?
So for property owners, so where the owner actually lives on the property, it can be returned after good payment after 12 months. So if they weren't able to get the security deposit waived on day one, then they can automatically get it after 12 months as long as they've been good at paying their bill on time.
Okay, now,
We do not, excuse me, Jim, just one more second. We do not refund the security deposit on rental units until the service is ended. So they've requested the service be shut.
let's talk about rental, because I think that's where this, the biggest part of our problem is. Susan, did you have your?
I just wanted to, 14 years ago I moved here and I didn't have to pay a security deposit for the electric. And I had good credit with PP&L because I lived in Sellersville and I never missed a payment and I've always paid on time. So I think maybe sometimes renters, if they have good credit, are still being penalized by those who abscond without paying.
Well, did they come back and make you pay security deposit after the fact?
Here?
Yeah.
I moved in and they turned on the electric.
She's just saying if there are people that are renting that have good means, she doesn't see the need.
That's
Well, I'm just saying, I've had good credit
And
with
I'll show
PP&L.
you 20 landlords that will disagree with it.
Right.
Speaking of.
Yeah, just because somebody has a good pay history, not say you, but I've had people also that had good references for apartments and all of a sudden they stopped paying rent too. And for me to keep getting stuck with people's electric because they didn't give a deposit and then I get a lien put on my property and I don't pay it isn't fair in my opinion. That should be, when they come in to sign up for the electric, they don't have the money for the deposit, they don't get electric. Because I just got stuck, someone moved in April, never gave a deposit, and July 27th, their electric was finally shut off. I had to pay $266 to have the electric turned back on after I moved here. That shouldn't be my fault that a deposit wasn't given in April. And that's where it just, I don't think it's right. I didn't use the electric, but I had to pay for it.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons we're discussing this. We need to look at the security deposit procedure for tenants. Homeowners is a different story. before, a few years back. I guess it's never been made a policy. Now we're trying to make a new policy where this is one, and everyone, does council agree that a security deposit is required at the time of signing? Or a tenant?
Can I just play devil's advocate?
Sure, go right ahead.
So, define own property through apartments. I probably would give some kind of a rental security deposit. And it should not, as you know, would be not just for an end, or maybe I can't do this on that. But should I include some of those utilities as possible? It shouldn't be the landlords.
Well, the landlord doesn't have a utility. The utility company has. The utility company should require security.
You are, but the landlord is a property owner.
Yes.
So, renter leaves. And electric before you get to the next.
John, I think the landlord laws and regulations are very specific. If I'm not correct, you're not allowed to collect security for your utility, correct?
Well, as far as I know, I can get a month's security, which is I'm just gonna use my last tenant as an example. I got $675 security deposit. It took me 2 months to evict them. So I lost 2 months worth of rent, so one of those months that I had the security went to that. I got stuck with an almost $300 electric bill, plus $300 in court costs to get them. So I lost all that money. The utilities, once I paid, $266 went back into my name. So I'm responsible for paying those until I get it rented again, and the next tenant who's in has to switch back into their name, whether that be 3 weeks or 3 months.
But I don't think a landlord is allowed to say, give me the first month and the last month's rent, the security, and then give me a $300.
Right, and really, why is it my responsibility as a landlord to be monitoring that they're paying their electric? That should be.
But I'm not sure that a landlord's allowed to do that.
I don't know, I've seen what the tenant.
They get a copy of it.
That was my question.
Okay, so they are allowed.
Yes.
They could do it if they want to.
I don't know about collecting the security deposit. That would be a.
No, she's talking about a copy of the bill.
No, I'm asking about the security deposit.
You're talking about collecting additional deposit.
Security for a utility, as a landlord, are you permitted to do that?
I don't know
I don't think so.
legally, but I do know of
I thought you
a
meant you get a copy of their electric bill to see if they're paying. Jason.
I do know of a few landlords in town that have started collecting an additional deposit. In addition to their rental deposit, I guess like a landlord electric security deposit that they hold on to until the electric bill is paid when the tenant moves out. Whether it's legal, I don't know. But I know some of them have told me that they do it.
They're only allowed to do first and last month, and I think there's a limit to that too. That's for rent, this is for security for utilities, so it's a different category.
I mean, say it's just the landlords collect additional money, so they watch the business end of that instead of the borough having to watch it. That's all.
Yeah, if you're saying that legally landlords can do the first and last month, that's, it's a limit, but that's fine. That was my question, really.
I think that they have a limit.
And that's fine. So, since they are restricted, then that puts some onus back on, I think, borough utility.
Does the water department allow to do that?
The water department, as far as security deposit?
Yes, as a security deposit.
I think they are allowed to, but they don't.
Yeah, I didn't think that they did.
They
So,
don't.
how do they handle situations, or is
They put it right
water
back in the-
usually just wrapped into the
They
rent?
put it right back on the landlord. Just like,
I'm doing that in the rent, so I don't have to worry
Okay,
about
so you
that.
don't have that problem.
Correct, I already paid.
problems. She doesn't need water problem too.
I just,
The authority, the same question, there's a problem.
So right now, rentals are only recourse.
No.
Late notice, late and shut off.
And you pay,
Duplicate bills of all late notices and shut-off notices are sent to all landlords. So if you have a tenant that's paying every month on time, as a landlord, you're not gonna get any duplicate because they're paying. Once they miss a payment and they fall behind, and that, whenever a tenant gets a late notice or a shut-off notice, a duplicate one goes to the landlord's address also.
Have you found that long-term renters deposits back after a year, are long-term renters proven to be just as reliable?
No, not, well, there's homeowners that they can be good for years, and then, you know, something comes up, someone loses a job. A lot of it is family splits up. The electric's, you know, gonna be in the husband's name, he's somewhere else, he doesn't care what's going on with it, and it's getting, you know, late, shut off. That's with homeowners and renters, but I've had plenty of renters that have had their security deposit refunded before we changed the ordinance 2 or 3 years ago, when the tenant could have their security deposit refunded with 12 good months of payments. They've had it refunded, and now they're on disconnect lists because of non-payment.
All right, so we're looking to change this thing to money up front on security deposits? Is that going to be difficult to do, Joe? Is that going to be difficult to bill right when they sign up, or?
No, it actually is going to save several hours. It's actually going to save several hours a month in billing.
Okay.
It's a smaller area is what I'm trying to get to, it's what you're using it.
Well, it's a total electric house.
It's not necessarily, people rent very large houses. I have some of our largest electric consumptions are rentals.
Okay, so you're gonna have the same requirement, whatever, $300 or whatever, whether it be a small one-bedroom unit or whether it be a 3-bedroom home.
It goes by heating. If your heating is electric, it's 300. If your heating is something else like oil, gas, or coal, or wood, or whatever, then it's 200.
Do we have consensus then?
I think we do. Like the security deposit immediately. Correct?
Well, what we had proposed is actually this and the other issue that's on here is to discuss it now, and then we have a policy that we drafted, and we would like to ask all of the Borough Council to approve the policy. You know, just, obviously this is not a part of the ordinance. The ordinance is written in a much more general manner, so that the policy would be something that we would ask council to support at the next meeting, and then we would implement it shortly thereafter.
We can only recommend council. We're not voting on it, we're just recommending. Council do vote.
Mr. Mayor, that's the intent. We've been planning on bringing this to council for about a year now, so I wanted to refresh myself before the meeting tonight. We're going to confirm that before the next council meeting, yes. That it's just a policy change and not a change to the ordinance.
Okay. And the next issue would be residential disconnection policy during the winter months.
So this is another policy issue that's come up. It's come to our attention more recently because of the changes that have been made to our municipal electric utilities, along with the, you know, the IOUs, the PP&L, Med, et cetera, who are now allowed to shut off during the winter months. So for those of you who don't already know, there's a period of time during the winter where the borough does not shut electric off on residential only. November 1st until April 15th. While we do continue to try to collect on late accounts, we do not shut off the electric. For obvious reasons, we don't want anyone to have their electric shut off, and then. But as the PUC is moving through this with these larger utilities, they're finding that you know, that's a big chunk of the year that the borough is not collecting, and we have a significant number of people who are aware of the months that we don't shut off, take advantage to some extent of the fact we're not shutting off, and rack up really large bills for the course of the winter. So we're talking about 5.5 months, so it's almost half the year, where, you know, this year on April 15th, Jason had printed out some numbers for me, which I didn't get to get from him. But we had over 25 accounts that owed over $1,000, and we had 5 accounts that owed us over $2,000. Every year we're surprised, and we do try to track these situations, you know, every April 15th to try to compare how we're doing, but the average bill that's due on April 15th is $650, so it's a significant amount of money, And I can say with a lot of certainty that these accounts that, you know, the borough is pretty good about finally collecting the money, do have to shut off accounts. When we saw, again, that a lot of these, that the PUC had changed its regulations and allowing these other utilities to actually do shut-offs during the winter, they actually have to provide more notice. The technical winter months for them have changed. So the winter months have changed to December, again, in hopes of getting our customers and continue paying on their electric accounts. And that's what we're asking council, if they have any interest. We have a pretty,
There's hard losses to landlords because a tenant can move in August. By the time their 40 days past due is past November 1st, they don't have to pay until April 15th. And I have at least 10 every April that move out April 10th. Haven't paid anything, and the landlord's stuck with a $1,500 electric bill, $2,000. I still have one, it's been off for 2 or 3 months now, that tenants moved in, ran up the electric. We still can't even figure out what they were doing to use so much electric, didn't pay it, and then moved out on the landlord, who was their friend, actually letting them stay there. They took off in the middle of the night, and the electric stayed off for over a month till the landlord could get enough money together to get it turned back on.
yeah, I mean, Jason's bringing up a good point. With you know, a property that's, the homeowner's actually living in the property, we're always going to collect because we put a lien on the property. So even if the homeowner has vacated, we make sure we put a property on the property and then collect it when it's sold.
So you're saying the PUC is deregulated the winter shut-off months?
They have changed it now. Again, the borough doesn't fall under the PUC, but they have definitely changed it at the request of the utilities to allow them to continue to collect because it's an obvious problem.
December through March then?
Yes.
Let's be clear, it's a significant amount of time that a lot of different staff members spend. So not only do you have Jason who's, you know, right around the start of April, because they're not calling during the winter to say, hey, you know, I lost my job, I can't make a payment. It's generally the end of March, beginning. But it's also, you know, Joe and I who are getting the elevated phone costs. And another important factor is Howie and his crew go out to hang all of the L tags, which is the notice that's put out 3 days before we do the shut-off, and then the actual shut-off. So you're talking about hundreds of tags that sometimes are. And then the last point I would make on this, and this is a problem that we've really started to notice lately, is there are programs out there, national programs, the ones called LIHEAP, that actually do provide funding for low-income families who can't pay their utility bills. However, LIHEAP closes end of March, beginning of April. So a lot of times these people don't realize that they could have gotten funding from the LIHEAP program if they would have called, you know, more towards March or even throughout the winter to try to get help with their utility bill. But because they waited until essentially the day of shutting off or the day before, they've missed out on one program that could have helped them pay their bill. So by changing that window, and so it's still in March there, hopefully more of our customers who are in a situation where they would qualify for help.
What I'm wondering is an impact on them, they can't pay, dialogue with them to help them understand what they are and the telephone number and tell them to. My conscience is going to can turn off people who are impacted by job loss or illness.
I can tell you that my tenant that didn't pay over the winter, they still had their internet the whole winter, they still had their cell phones all winter, one wife still had her nails getting done all winter, so they weren't having such financial struggles that they couldn't afford those things, but they just chose not to pay their electric from November until April.
I'm sure there are people out there that have absolutely no sense of responsibility or any principles as far as what they want to do to rid people off. We also have a segment of our community that is going to be impacted by adverse conditions that they are not in control of. And we have to realize that we have to live in a community here and what we're doing to other community customers.
It's important to note that we do make sure to provide, we have 4 or 5 different funding sources, and Jason especially, but I've had to work with him as well, so worked very closely with those funding sources to help people who are in that type of situation who can prove that they are.
You know, Scott was saying though, that some people don't realize that this funding is available for them until it's time to for us to turn off their electricity or the time periods towards the
Right.
end.
That's 1 on 4, yes. We still have other resources, so as long as they haven't abused the other resources, then they can.
Start turning it off at the beginning, when they first start falling through the hole.
Okay.
Yeah.
Amy, Jackie?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of anecdotal stories that can be told around this and why people, don't pay their electric or whatever, but I think one of the things we're missing here is that our rates are 66% higher than they were in 2008. So maybe that's contributing to people's problems. So why make it tougher now before the rates will come down eventually in 2016? Why are we going to crack down now? We still get the money eventually, except for those, I guess you call them the hard losses where people will just leave. But from what I'm hearing, most of the time you end up getting the money just late, just delayed. So, let's not crack down on people during the wintertime that are maybe having issues because of the problem we're in now with our high electric rates. Let's wait that out and maybe make a change at that point in time. That's my comment.
Andrea, can I just clear up the procedure here?
Absolutely.
2 months in arrears constitute the show. Is that correct?
Okay, so Jason will have to call me out on this one because I have him walk me through it every time. You get billed on the 15th of every month, we read meters, and that bill is due on the 15th. Due on the 15th of that month, and then you don't pay, let's say. So why don't I have Jason come up here, because he explains it so much better than I do.
Okay. An account has to be more than 40 days past due for us to be able to print a final disconnection note. Now, when we print those, it gives them, right, there's 2 notices. What we would in-house consider a late notice. It actually says disconnect on the notice, but it's meant to get their attention.
So Jason, again, her bill was due on the 15th of the month, so when does the late notice get sent out?
The late notice, if your bill's due the 15th of August and it's not paid, you'll get a late notice around the 10th of the following month. You get about almost 3 weeks where you can pay it between when it was due and when you get a late. If that late notice is not paid, now that goes out, say, September 10th, and the due date on this is going to be September 30th. If that's not paid, it gives 20 days. If that's not paid, when we run the late notices from September, October 10th, we'll have a final disconnection notice. They've already had
the additional month added to.
That's how people, correct, that's how people get so far behind, because, it's not just the late note, the amount you didn't pay from the month before, but then the amount from that month gets added, and then when you get to your 3rd month, when you're up for disconnection, you have to pay all your past due to keep from being disconnected.
This month.
You have to clear the past due amount to avoid from being disconnected.
Just the past due amount. So you might have a current bill that's in the middle of the cycle that's not due quite yet, and that bill you don't have to pay unless only past due amount you have to pay. So only what is past the due date.
Well, our payment system, we would consider.
Mr. Mayor, you have a great question, and I'm going to try to answer it as delicately as possible. So as far as asking for a payment plan, on a rare occasion, for instance, we do allow for medical reasons. So if somebody's about to get shut off and shows us a note from a doctor that says that they have some kind of medical necessity that requires the use of electricity, we give them additional time. So perhaps 2 weeks to pay that bill. And then after that point, they need to find either, if they weren't able to get help from one of the resources that we have that provide assistance, then they need to find alternative living situations that can help them with their medical condition. But as far as trying to do a payment plan with one of the borough's customers, we have definitely stayed away from that, and that's because it's not our money to loan out, and that's kind of how we've always looked at it. We're not per se a bank, like you said, that can loan money to people. So we see it as this is the taxpayer dollars, and it's our responsibility to make sure that that money is where it's supposed to be. So we have not allowed for payment plans, as you would say, after the due date like that. If they needed to get a loan in order to pay, any other kind of thing, then they would go to the bank, and we just have found that it's been the policy of the borough to not make a loan like that to anyone.
what is council's consensus in this? What do you feel we should do? The winter shut off? Keep it the same, lower it, or limit it?
How do you still find out about your problem 15 days earlier, that's all?
Well, we would have gotten one more month's worth of payment before the winter hit. So you get that one more month, one more payment, and then the customer is a month and a half, has a month and a half less of a balance on the shut-off than the end of March.
And really, it goes back to the landlord situation, because a lot of them, you know, yes, we collected April 15th, instead of March 31st, April 1st, or whatever, but on the ones where the tenants are leaving, and they're leaving to the landlord, it gives them an extra month on the front for November, and those few days, those 15 days in April, where they're running it up, and they know they're leaving, and it happens a lot in April. There's countless ones where landlords end up having to come in on the 15th and pay because tenant took off and they can't have their unit there not with electric because they're trying to clean up the mess from the tenant that bailed on them. It really, I mean, if the tenant stays there, obviously they're going to pay it because they're going to, otherwise they would have no electing to the landlords who are, I don't have exact numbers because it's tough to track. A lot of landlords, when they get their duplicate bill and they know their tenant's gone, they just send the payment in. That I know of countless landlords that end up paying. Correct. And when I went through and counted those up today, I wanted to make a section that was 900 to 1,000 because there must have been. And if you figure, if there's someone that has electric heat and they're running a $600 or $700 bill in the winter, which is what not uncommon for someone living the landlord a month at $600, that's almost 1,000 right there.
Public forum, because we have that. If anyone that wishes to approach council on the public, please do so now.
My comments are specifically relating to the smart meters thing. And I'm a little surprised that we're even discussing an expense like that, being that everybody knows that the borough needs to cut expenses now and not increase them, especially when we're going to be losing a big electric consumer next year. You know, I think the bottom line for that is what's really in it for the residents to spend this money. Is there going to be a lower cost? Well, I've done a little bit of research on it, and everywhere I've seen people comment that get smart meters say bills go up. Less outages, I mean, let's face it, we have like the envy of the electric system in the county. Like, when do we lose power and it comes back on right away? It's been talked about, we have a 5% line loss. And then a couple statements after that, I heard 10% is where you start looking for problems. Well, we're not even halfway there. So the other concern, the personal concern, I don't want a two-way mesh device transmitting in and out of my home. I just don't want that. And a matter of fact, if you go, there's a congressional report that was done on smart meters, if you look it up online, and there's a lot of, it raises a lot of privacy concerns about the data that's getting transmitted back and forth. Not to mention, you know, interference with Wi-Fi devices or, you know, cordless phones or whatever. You know, it's the cutting edge of technology, I think, but why is Perkasie looking at this? We can't afford it. And kind of the last thing I'll throw out there is that, honestly, I don't really have a lot of confidence in the chairman here, because this is a gentleman that was involved in the debacle in 2008 where electric rates went up 66%. So quite honestly, I don't have any confidence to make the right decision. Thanks.
Anyone else? Hearing none, we'll go to the president. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
I forgot my smart council comment about smart meters.
Well, I was going to go up and say, I suggest instead of smart meters, we need some smart-ass meters.
Yeah. Oh, here's your pen.
Thank
you.
No problem.
I'm not lying. In Maryland, several occasions,